Nickelodeon has always been a popular kids channel, but in the last few months, more and more people are becoming aware of the other side of all these popular shows we grew up with. When we were kids, you probably saw shows like iCarly, Zack and Cody, Drake and Josh, and everything seemed perfect. These shows sold the American dream to the world. It felt like these shows were magical, but then skip ahead just a few decades, and suddenly people are starting to learn the truth about what was really going on behind these shows, and how truly twisted Hollywood is towards child actors in particular. And when you look closely into this, you realize how deep the rabbit hole goes about the man who created it all, Dan Schneider. You see, Schneider was the producer and mastermind behind shows such as Drake and Josh, Zoe 101, and iCarly, amongst many more. The stories were great for kids, they were hilarious, they stood the test of time, they were nostalgic, the actors had brilliant chemistry on screen, and children loved the shenanigans that the characters got up to. With all this fun being portrayed, the American dream being sold to generations across the world, there was no way to guess that something deeply disturbing was happening behind the scenes. But then in 2022, the kid stars that people had grown up with their whole life started to speak up about their experiences on the shows, showing that this picturesque image they were putting out to the world was really the complete opposite behind the scenes. Realizing that there was a trend amongst the actors, Investigation Discovery decided to dive into the world of Nickelodeon and find out what really happened behind the scenes, and the results were incredibly disturbing. And so they would post their discoveries in a docuseries that's blowing up right now called Quiet on Set: The Dark Side of Kids TV, and horrifically, while it does highlight the abuse and toxic environment young actors had to suffer through, it barely even scratches the surface. That's why in this video, we're going to show the even darker side of what was really happening behind the scenes, and why a man who created such brilliant and entertaining kids content should be facing a very lengthy jail sentence. Once described as Nickelodeon's golden child, Dan Schneider began producing several live action shows in the early 1990s. His work captivated millions of teenagers and children from around the world. However, what was once acceptable for his young audience gradually became a concern as the years started to go by and people reflected on what they used to watch as children. You see, longtime viewers of Schneider's shows identified his obsession with children's feet and the inappropriate sexual conduct he had scripted for child actors. Schneider's obsession with childlike actors allegedly started in the early 90s with the discovery of the All That, starring Amanda Bynes. As a 30-year-old scout, Schneider would quickly become fixated on Bynes after seeing a short recording of her performing stand-up comedy. Amanda would then star in Nickelodeon's 1990s hit, The Amanda Show. During her time as an actor on the show, Amanda was unknowingly scripted to partake in events unsuitable for a 13-year-old girl. One of the most notable examples was a recurring bit during which Amanda would interview older men in a jacuzzi. This was a period before the public had any idea that people like Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, all these creepy, dark, twisted rabbit holes within the Hollywood and financial elites was really going on. People would never suspect that creepy predators would be the ones producing the culture for the masses. No one would ever expect anything from these people. It was a very, very different time culturally, and so in Schneider's eyes at the time, he thought this was harmless. So harmless in fact that he featured himself as a guest on the show and participated in a jacuzzi interview with Amanda. And over the years, people have started raising eyebrows about how this was ever allowed, especially when Jenny Kilgan, one of the female writers on the show, alleged that Schneider forced her to watch adult entertainment. Jenny later sued Nickelodeon for gender discrimination and for creating a hostile work environment, and this was the first time that someone sued the studio because of Schneider's actions and due to his terrible decision making, but it certainly wouldn't be the last. At the time, this seemed like a shock. How could someone sue the person making all these great nostalgic shows that we grew up with? They created our childhood culture and inspired a generation of kids around the world. How could someone sue the creator of all of this stuff? Well, Jenny would continue to explain her actions by discussing all the creepy stuff that was happening in the film industry at the time, but back then no one cared. At first, she had no idea when she started working for Nickelodeon. It seemed like a golden opportunity with this rising network. However, soon after joining, a darker, sinister truth was about to be revealed. After being chosen for the position as a writer through a job forum, Jenny and another writer were hired as the only two female writers for Schneider's shows. At the time, both writers were manipulated into sharing one salary. The reason being, Schneider was only willing to hire the female writers if they split a salary. No one thought to challenge the idea of two employees sharing a salary. Whatever Schneider wanted was golden and pressed in stone due to the huge success he was bringing to Nickelodeon and the Hollywood industry. and people just somehow accepted it, and it seemed like all the employees enjoyed working in the same room as Schneider. He was a writing genius, great at directing and producing all of these fantastic shows for children. But then it started getting weird. One of the first signs was his constant jokes targeting individuals on his team. He would often say to his writers, women can't write funny, and challenge them to find a funny female writer, which is kind of just the banter of men in the 90s, and could be passed off fairly easily. But then it started getting worse and worse, and Schneider's comments eventually led to another gender discrimination case in 2000, where one of the female writers of The Amanda Show claimed that the producer would frequently message her and request that she give him massages in the writer's room. Really creepy Weinstein-style stuff. But despite showing multiple red flags in his career, Nickelodeon brushed aside allegations which Schneider faced, because they knew he was their golden goose. He was writing these excellent shows, he knew what children wanted to see, and he was of course bringing in fat stacks of cash for the executives at Nickelodeon. So the television channel settled the discrimination matter outside of court and turned a blind eye to the dangers which would scar the careers of future child actors. Now by this point, Amanda's childhood acting career as a Nickelodeon star was continuing to shine as Schneider arranged for her to co-star in Paul Giamatti's film Big Fat Liar. And following the movie's success, Amanda then acted in Nickelodeon's What I Like About You series. The series touched on some controversial topics that often exploited Amanda as a vulnerable teenager actress. Schneider scripted scenes where the young actresses wore inappropriate clothing for a teenage girl, and spoke about male erections with sexual innuendos. Really creepy stuff. And as this was the early 2000s, where people were so naive to all the creepiness happening behind the scenes in these big studio companies, many viewers must have just shrugged off the blatant use of sexual innuendos in What I Like About You. However, this constant theme continued to plague other Nickelodeon programs. Victorious has far too many examples, including scenes where characters are slapped in the face with a sausage or shake weights in an inappropriate manner. In one episode, Ariana Grande's character, Kat, tries to milk a potato by squeezing it. Now, Schneider would repeatedly sexualize material for his own child actors, and maybe remind you that some of these actors weren't even 16 years old. The scenarios and the jokes he made the actors do, when watching in hindsight, seem completely out of line. One of the scenes which scarred Jamie Lynn Spears' career was in an episode of Zoey 101 when a tube of goo squirts all over her face. After filming the scene, one of Spears' male co-stars turned to her and said the scene reminded him of a shot. This incident wouldn't be the first or last attempt either to inadvertently recreate an adult entertainment scene. Ariana Grande's character was forced to pour water over her face in an effort to drink it. And the scene just makes you want to know, why couldn't they just use a glass? It was this creepy sexualizing of Grande's character in Victorious and Sam and Cat that made people question Schneider's motives as a producer. However, at the time, his future as a producer at Nickelodeon remained very promising. In fact, he was at the top of the company. He was one of the main guys propelling Nickelodeon to TVs all around the world. He knew what the kids wanted and was a genius at writing for them. However, to what extent was Nickelodeon prepared to deal with his misconduct and all these weird allegations made against him? Well, in 2013, the public perception of Nickelodeon's golden child took a turn in the wrong direction when Sam and Cat, another of Dan's creations, ran a competition. Fans were challenged to write on the bottom of their foot and submit photos to the studio. Understandably, the competition was considered a little bit absurd. Why on earth would Nickelodeon want pictures of feet? Worse, why would they want pictures of children's feet? That was when the penny dropped for thousands of Schneider fans. This constant creepy use of child foot humor, the unnecessary inclusion of random feet, it was all starting to add up. The competition confirmed what some fans would describe as Schneider's foot fetish or fascination. In a recent interview, former Zoey 101 actor Alex Nicholas spoke out about the producer's obsession with children's feet. Nicholas alleged that Schneider would often walk around the set with a digital camera, offering children money in exchange for pictures of their feet.
I saw him do very inappropriate behavior on set. I saw him, going around and trying to take photos of kids' feet.
And as a child, you were like, this is weird? Or
I
looking
didn't think
back?
it was. Well, he was walking around with dollar bills. That's what I remember. And he was telling the kids, come, I'll take photos of your feet and give you $1. Like it was like some funny hoax,
Schneider made things significantly worse for himself when he began posting photos of female actresses' feet online. This immediately raised concerns, and Nickelodeon subsequently launched 2 internal investigations due to concerns about Dan's behavior. Jeanette McCurdy, who played Sam in iCarly and Sam in Cat, said that after the investigation, Schneider would refrain from interacting with certain actors from the show. Instead, he would write notes from his office and have an assistant pass them on. Not only did this leave his reputation hanging in the balance as people were unsure what to think, but it also left people wondering what Nickelodeon Nickelodeon had found that made Schneider so keen to stay in his office, and if it was so bad, why wasn't he forced out of the company? And Hollywood itself. Despite concerns and the fact that something dodgy was clearly going on behind the scenes, the producer continued to work for the television channel and produce Game Shakers and Henry Danger. It seemed like the studio had purposely forgotten about all that had transpired, but then in 2017, Nickelodeon's parent company Viacom CBS launched another investigation into Schneider's alleged sexual behavior. Whilst the results of the investigation found no evidence of sexual misconduct, the report did reveal that Schneider could be verbally abusive towards those who were working for him. This reawakened fans' concerns, and in 2018, after extensive rumors that Schneider was sexualizing actors, he was unexpectedly sacked by Nickelodeon. But at this point, it'd been decades of him working at the company. Now, the studio didn't help the rumor mill when they gave the former producer a $7 million payout following his termination. And after being sacked, Schneider denied any allegations of misconduct. In a statement to the New York Times, he said, quote, "I couldn't and I wouldn't have a long-term friendship and continued loyalty from so many reputable people if I mistreated my actors of any age, especially minors." However, there are some other overlooked issues as well. For example, one actor, Tiesha Hampton, who was formerly married to Cal Mitchell and Nickelodeon's star, went online in an interview addressing and outing Nickelodeon's practices head-on.
The reason why the TV shows, the Nickelodeon shows were filmed in Florida was because Florida had no child labor laws.
Tiesha claimed that Nickelodeon moved to film in Orlando, Florida because of their lack of child labor laws. This gave producers the freedom to do what they wanted with no consequences. Tiesha said they would show adult entertainment and be completely inappropriate with their child actors. They would even go to clubs with fake IDs supplied by people on set.
Because we would get into clubs and we were young, like 16, 17 years old, we'd be in clubs. And the people on the set in Florida made us fake IDs.
Child actors were picked on how much control they had with parents out of the way. If an active parent wanted to be on set, they would say it was distracting. And one parent even spoke out about it, Tracy Brown, whose son Brian Hearn was cast in season 7 for all that. And Tracy had no problems telling Dan Schneider no when asked if Brian could go out with him. She said that Dan did not like her, and she did not like him either. And apparently this ultimately led to Brian being fired for having a controlling parent involved. Now, Nickelodeon's plans to quietly get rid of Schneider while sweeping what he'd done under the rug completely backfired after Quiet on Set aired and uncovered the atrocities of Schneider and many other members of the Nickelodeon team, and how predatory Hollywood is as a whole to child star actors. The 5-part documentary series featured testimonies from a number of former cast members, including people like Drake Bell, Kyle Sullivan, Katrina Johnson, and Alexa Nicholas, amongst many, many more. And the stories exposed what it was like working with Schneider and how child actors at a young age were forced to participate in scenes that left them feeling violated. And one of the most disturbing secrets the docuseries brought to light, and that made people question how common this sort of behavior is within Hollywood as a whole, was the sexual abuse of child actor Drake Bell for the program Drake and Josh. The docuseries reveals that Bell suffered sexual abuse from one of Nickelodeon's coaches named Brian Peck, who was arrested in August 2003. During the trial, Peck received 41 letters of good character from leading personnel in the industry, appealing to the judge for a lenient sentence. So Peck was only given 16 months imprisonment for the abuse he had done to the child actor, and was later registered as a sex offender. And after becoming, yes, a registered sex offender, Disney knowingly hired Peck for the teen sitcom Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. The controversy centered around the documentary series for Schneider to face the music, and in response to the docuseries, Schneider decided to go back on a statement he released to the New York Times and released one of the most controversial and scripted apology videos. In the video, Dan is being interviewed by Boogie, one of his former actors from the series iCarly. A Nickelodeon actor who experienced firsthand what it was like to work with Dan on set would be the perfect interviewer for a video of this magnitude. They'd put Dan on the spot, make him squirm, and answer for the abuse he put so many people through for years. But unfortunately, the video was far from what people were expecting. Boogie didn't press Dan for answers or bring up how he sexualized children in his shows and forced them to do wildly inappropriate scenes. Dan doesn't even bother taking accountability for his actions.
I can tell you why it hurts really bad for me.
In fact, the entire video was made as a PR stunt to try and make him seem like the victim and to justify his actions at the time. The producer shows sentiments of remorse for his actions, and even sheds a few tears, but the whole thing is just so inauthentic. He even attempts to pull one of the tricks that landed him where he is today, ignoring the gravity of the situation and mitigating his actions.
Look, I've had some employees that have worked for me for 10 years, some more than 20 years, who would work with me again, but not everybody. There's still a significant number that didn't have a great time working for me.
Instead, he shifted the blame back to the studio by explaining that every show and script had to be approved by network executives and that any scenes that could be seen as inappropriate or upsetting somebody could be edited out.
So if there's anything in a show that needs to be cut because it's upsetting somebody, let's cut it.
So I think it's big for you to say with your work, if it's viewed as that today, you don't have a problem.
Cut it. Cut it.
I mean, that's a solution.
While the studio can be blamed for many of the things that were allowed to happen, Schneider is far from innocent. At least that's what the court of public opinion says. The truth of the matter lies in the shows that Schneider produced. He's constantly been such a weird guy to be around, living out his dark fantasies through his shows and relationships with child actors. And now people are saying that his attempts to emancipate Amanda from her parents back in the early 2000s was merely a ploy to play the fatherly figure he so desperately wants to play. His obsession with being a dominant fatherly figure even made his child actors refer to him as daddy on set. The docu-series revealed several scenes where Schneider would put his arms around his actors and in a sense manipulated them into thinking that they were his prized possessions. Not only did Schneider feel like he could control these kids, but he forced them to reenact his wildest fantasies. And in all honesty, an insincere apology from him in a scripted video will never be enough to change what happened. His idea of cutting out inappropriate scenes from shows that aired close to 10 years ago is totally ludicrous. Dan Schneider's $7 million paycheck meant that he never has to work another day in his life. He is completely set for life, not to mention all the success he brought Nickelodeon and how much he was rewarded privately. So despite the accusations against him and the fact that he will never be able to produce again, it certainly seems that this is a worrying trend that's being uncovered throughout Hollywood, and it's just a symptom of a much wider problem happening in the entertainment industry as a whole. And only time will tell who will be exposed next.